Who the hell do you think you are, you little bastard? You may have been hot stuff when you were 15, but now you're just the shit. Hey guys and girls, happy October once again, and that's one of many standout lines from the movie I'm going to be talking about today. It's The Legend of Hell House from 1973. Full spoilers from the start of this review pretty much. This is a first time watch for me. I'd not really heard of this one actually until recently. I think it was Alex from somewhere in October who turned me on to this when she was doing a bunch of 70s movies, and it got brought up when she was on the live stream. So I'll give her some props for that and say thank you, Alex, because this was definitely one which was worth checking out and ticking off. Me and Alex did a review this month. Earlier in the month we reviewed the 80s film Night of the Demons, so you can go and check out that review on the channel now, and also check out her channel as well. Give it a little plug there. At some point we're hoping to do the sequel to Night of the Demons, but we're not quite sure when. The setup is pretty familiar. A bunch of therapists and doctors go to this old haunted house where years ago a bunch of scientists, therapists, whatever you want to say, they died there when they went for this weekend, and you had the challenge about if they can survive the week or weekend, then they get a bunch of money. The guy who runs the house also died there supposedly and is meant to be haunting it. This group come in and they're taking on the house as well, and if they can survive they get I think it was $100,000, something like that. But the catch is also that one of them, Ben Fisher, he was in the house all those years ago when those other doctors and scientists died. So back in the 50s, I think they say. As a young man, he was there, and he's the only one to get out alive. And that's sort of one of the big things really for his character in this, is when things are really starting to go down, he's the one who's saying to them, let's not mess with it, let's just keep our heads down, see out the week, and then bank the money. That's part of his whole thing. But there's this thing with him, and I think her name's Florence, Dr. Tanner, where they're both mediums, but he's said to be a more physical medium, whereas she's like more mental. But then when stuff starts happening with her, it seems as though something is being brought out of her, which makes her a physical medium. The two, they're like a married couple, the Barretts. So you've got the guy who's a doctor, and he takes a bit of a different approach to the other two, in not really believing that the spirits of like the professor and all the rest of them are haunting this. And then you've got the wife there as well, and one of the other big storylines or subplots is that Florence believes that Daniel, the son of the late professor, is also haunting their house, and that throughout the movie she's trying to prove to the others that Daniel is there in spirit and is haunting her. And even because at one point they find a body with Daniel that belongs to Daniel, and they bury it, and they assume that's going to be the end of it, but then things start happening again. What's funny about this one is it coming in the 70s. It feels like a very, I don't want to say dated, but it feels like an older kind of movie, but brought forward to the 70s, because one of the big things about horror in the 70s, and it was something which films like Black Christmas and Halloween did, was it definitely updated things and moved them to more modern settings, and like suburban neighbourhoods and moved them away from the haunted houses or castles, and we started to get less supernatural movies and moving more into the slasher area and different kinds of villains. Little bit more realistic in some ways, but so to get this movie in the 70s is it's sort of funny because it's very different era that's starting. And the other thing is, because it's in the 70s, the movie is in colour, which isn't a big deal, but some movies benefit from being in colours, some don't. Some movies, it doesn't matter either way, but some movies definitely benefit from being in black and white as well. And I think this is one movie where, and again, it's not a massive deal, it was never going to be a deal breaker for the movie, but a lot of those old gothic haunted house movies from the 50s and 60s, 40s as well, I think they are a bit more effective because of the black and white and the gothic look to it and all the rest. So that's just something to point out. Then maybe it would have been good if this was in black and white, but it obviously doesn't matter a great deal. If the movie's good, it's going to be good, and I would get over that. I mean, I had a pretty good time with this. It's a really solid movie. I think it's more of a guilty pleasure movie in some ways, although there are some scary moments in it. And there's some interesting ideas, but I think in many ways it's the antics of the characters, and it does get quite hammy at times, which there's a couple of scenes really made me laugh with that stuff. And you get some decent set pieces. I think they definitely overdo it with the set pieces, and things do start to get a bit repetitive, I think, as things goes on. So I think in many ways it's a movie you enjoy more for the goofy stuff and some of the antics and how weird it gets at points, rather than actually saying, okay, this is a great movie. It's a decent movie. Like, the house has a decent look. There's a decent atmosphere, at least at the start of the movie. When they first come into the house, it's all misty, and when they come inside, there's a decent look to the house and atmosphere. A lot of good, like when you see the dining table and things like that, or later on when Dr. Barrett has a machine which he plans to use to get rid of the demons. Like, his plan is just to drain the house of its energy and set off all this stuff to exorcise them. It's a bit funny with that stuff because he's arguing with Florence over saying, yeah, I don't believe the professor is still here and haunting the house, and no one seems to believe her about the Daniel stuff. But he clearly believes there are spirits there, otherwise he wouldn't be letting this stuff off. So it's a bit funny that he doesn't buy into that, like, the professor haunting their house, because that just would seem obvious. If you believe in ghosts anyway and you believe there is something there, then I don't know, it just seems logical then you would go to that. The look of that machine is very old school as well, and they've got some old school recording equipment, things like that. So I think a lot of times with these old movies and setting a house like that and some of the props, where it's just a bit more practical or a bit more traditional and just looks a bit more distinct, I think, than a lot of times now if you had a similar type movie. So all that stuff I really appreciated. I think you definitely lose some of the atmosphere and tension as the movie goes on. It becomes so much about the antics of the characters, and like I said, they definitely overdo it with the set pieces. The storyline does start to get repetitive as well. And I think over time it may be, even though you're seeing quite a lot of spooky shit go down and different set pieces. Like, I think just over time, you just lose a bit of the edge and a bit of the atmosphere, and it's at that point where I think you just have to try and enjoy it as like a campy, goofy sort of time. Start of the movie definitely is the better. Like, I would say for a good... The movie's about an hour and a half, so I would say for a good 40 minutes, 45 minutes, then it's pretty strong, and then it starts to peter out after that. The ending did fall a bit flat, and the way things progress, like the scene where you lose Florence in the church, or the scene where, well, the death of of Dr. Barrett is actually quite entertaining, like, because at first it looks like he's cleared the house with his experiment, but then he sees the reading and the meter start to go wild again, so he's like, oh my god, it can't be, and then it kind of splatters back in his face and he gets killed, and it looks quite visually pleasing, because there are a few moments of gore in this movie. Like, for an early 70s movie and on a very low budget, it's not too bad in that regard. There's pretty decent stuff there. The ending, I think, just feels a bit of an anticlimax. Like, it just doesn't feel like it was a particularly satisfying ending or that good, and it just feels that, as I said, even though I quite enjoyed Dr. Barrett's death, like him dying and Florence before him, it just doesn't feel that it amounts to a whole lot, and that their deaths really were sold that well, so it didn't mean too much really. So it's a decent movie, but I think by the end it does fall a little bit flat. Some fun antics from the characters. Some of the acting is pretty ropey, I'd say that, but like I said, some of the hammy acting and over the top dialogue sort of makes up for that. I think the wife of Dr. Barrett is the worst when it comes to the acting, and she's a pretty useless character, because all she has to do really is that at one point she gets possessed and she starts sleepwalking, and she keeps acting sexy, so she finds Ben and takes her clothes off and is acting all unhinged and flirting with him, and he sort of slaps her out of it. And then she kind of tries to do the same the next night, and the only thing that's different really is that her husband catches her, like she sees them, and later on Ben tells him about the sleepwalking the previous night, and they get into an argument over it, and so that and her just acting quite damsel in distress is pretty much all she has to do. So she was a useless character really. You didn't really need her in the movie. You could have just had the Doctor character be there on his own. And as I said, a lot of the Daniel stuff got quite repetitive, but there was some decent set pieces. Like, there's this one involving a cat which is meant to be possessed by Daniel or someone like that, who attacks Florence, and that scene looks pretty good actually, like the way it jumps at her and scratches her. For a 70s movie, it looks more convincing than you would think. Now later on, when the cat is found dead in the shower and you see blood coming out the shower, and Florence opens it up and finds it there. Now that doesn't look very good, because you get a close-up of the cat and it definitely looks like a puppet or a prop or something like that. The blood doesn't look very convincing, so just by having a close-up like that, it sort of revealed the limitations, whereas the earlier scene, because the cat was jumping about and there was some quite moody lighting and things, it was pretty well done. So there's definitely some decent enough set pieces, but there's a couple that are a little hokey as well. In a way, there's not that much to talk about. There's some entertaining dialogue along the way, like the stuff near the end where the Ben character is like really monologuing and going OTT, where he's trying to call out the spirit of the Doctor, like, because he starts saying things like, he starts insulting his mother and things like that. The wind is brushing his hair, like the hair is flying everywhere, and he's talking in a really high pitched voice. It's really funny. It was really entertaining stuff, kind of so bad it was good in a way. And they find the Doctor behind this hidden wall, and he's dead. And for some reason he cuts into his leg, but then he finds them they're false legs. And he says to Mrs. Barry, he says, well, he couldn't live with being so short, so he gave himself these false legs to make him look bigger. It's like, okay, whatever, Ben. Bit of a leap there. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And they just leave together, and that's pretty much the movie. So I don't know if that means they get the money or not. It depends. I'm not sure if they left early or not. It was definitely coming up to the time where they were due to leave. Pretty solid watch overall. It's only an hour and a half, so it's going to go in quite fast. It has a promising start as a horror movie, like if you want to get into it as a edge of your seat horror movie, but then it does peter out, I think, and it becomes more about some of the antics. And the problem with that stuff is that I think the plot does get repetitive, and they start repeating quite a lot of similar scenes, like the way you didn't need to have two of Mrs. Barrett sleepwalking and throwing herself at Ben. Like, you could have just done that scene once and had the same effect. If you can enjoy some of the cheese and the hammy type acting and some of the antics of the characters, because they're not the best characters in the world, but some of the dynamics between them I think are pretty well done. Like some of the debates between Mrs. Tanner and between Ben, and then the different point of view from the Doctor. I think a lot of horror fans will have a decent time with this one, and it's just one that's worth ticking off. So I'm going to give it a solid 6 out of 10. Nothing life-changing, but yeah, definitely one that's worth checking out. So that's my review of The Legend of Hell House. Let me know what you think of the movie if you've seen it in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media, and also let me know what you've been watching for October this year so far. If you have any films you want to recommend me from the 70s or other decades, then do let me know. If you want to help out the channel in other ways, you can make a donation at PayPal, a one-off donation, or you can hit the super thanks button. Also, you can hype the video up, hitting the hype button, which is meant to help out smaller creators. It just gets the videos out to more people. You get a certain amount of points for each hype up, and you get free to use a week. So, for example, if you, like, say I was your first one of the week, then that would be over 1,000 points. So, in theory, that could really help get the video out to more people. So, that's a nice free and easy way. And also there's patreon.com/borednow if you want to throw a few bucks my way a month, and you get a bunch of extras over there, some early access to stuff. Also channel memberships, which there's 3 different tiers, and some exclusives over there, like I've been doing some horror related read-alongs in the last few months, the last year or so. And some of the stuff you get on there will be the same stuff you get on Patreon, but there will also be some new stuff as well. And sometimes on both Patreon and channel membership, you will get exclusive clips which are cut out from like the bigger videos, like, and stuff which didn't make the final cut on the video. Say that tomorrow's review I will be reviewing a recent film, very low budget indie film called Morgan the Killer Doll, which is basically, from what I know, sort of a pastiche and like kind of like a send up to, well, Megan kind of thing, that sort of thing. So I'll be taking a look at that. The movie is free on YouTube, and that'll be the review tomorrow. There will be some bonus reviews this month, both for Patreon and channel members, so that's another incentive to maybe join up. But thanks again, guys. Have a great October, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
What in the name of God? What did he do to make this house so evil?
Murder, vampirism, cannibalism, drug addiction, alcoholism, sadism, mutilation.
How did it end?
If it had ended, we would not be here.
Billy's inside me. Even as I'm speaking to you, I can feel him just waiting in there to take over.
The house tried to kill me. It almost succeeded. I don't accept this. I do not accept this!
Naked, drunk, fighting. Oh, please get me out of here. Please.
Florence.